millions of people a year visit theme parks to escape the realities of everyday life. So it's not a surprise that most revolve around themes of fantasy and adventure, drawing on already established literary and cinematic genres for inspiration. This idea has remained at the heart of most theme parks, allowing us, the guests, to travel through time and space to both real and imagined destinations. However, the late 1980s saw the start of a deviation from this norm, which would continue into the following decade. Many companies began to abandon the immersion of story-like settings in favor of a new concept. That concept revolved around the industry of movie making. Since moving pictures were first created, people have been drawn to the screen. The glamour and allure of Hollywood and movie making has always intrigued people. Therefore, in 1915, when Universal Studios in Hollywood began offering a 25-cent studio tour to showcase the magic of movie making, tourists flocked to check it out. A decade later, when Walt Disney brought Mickey Mouse into the world, audiences were eager to get a similar peek behind the scenes. However, Walt believed that the process of making an animated film was far less interesting than making a live-action movie. He didn't think that walking past artists hunched over their latest sketch would be nearly as glamorous as walking through real-life sets. So, when it came to Walt's plans for Disneyland, he made sure that it wasn't going to be a behind-the-scenes look at the making of animated movies. It was instead about entering the fantasy worlds within them. Disneyland, of course, utilizes many building techniques of movie studio set design, such as forced perspective, to create a world like those within the movies, but these tricks were not to be explained to the guests. What Walt created was a very different type of tourist attraction to what Universal had. Universal's studio tour had to stop in the 1930s, when sound films became the standard, as noisy groups could no longer tour the studio with the new quiet-on-set rules. However, following the success of Disneyland, Universal knew that they wanted to create a tourist attraction once again to compete with this new one. Therefore, in 1965, Universal revived the studio tour in a more formalized way and began offering the tram tour concept we are so familiar with today. In these early years, the tram tour was hours long and took guests through genuine film sets, sound stages, and dressing rooms. The tour quickly developed to feature stage special effects, such as the Mexican flood scene, a terrifying rock slide, and a spinning avalanche tunnel. In 1976, Jaws made his way onto the tour, followed by King Kong in 1986 and Earthquake in 1988. With the success of these permanent ride-like scenes, it made sense for Universal to expand their offerings with the addition of a genuine theme park attraction. Thus, after adding some theatre effect shows, in 1991 they opened up their very first dark ride, the E.T. Adventure. From here, the park continued to grow, opening other theme park attractions, such as Back to the Future the Ride and Jurassic Park River Adventure. When Walt Disney World opened in Florida with just one theme park, the Magic Kingdom, in 1971, it was a huge success. And by the 1980s, Walt Disney World had established Florida as a must-visit vacation destination. Universal understandably wanted to get in on this success, and by the 1980s already had well-established plans to build Universal Studios Florida. With these plans, Universal hoped not only to build a theme park, but to establish Florida as a legitimate place for movie making, one which could truly rival Hollywood. In 1984, Michael Eisner became the CEO of the Walt Disney Company and practically saved Disney's animation studio, whilst also reviving their live-action studio. He also brought big ideas to the parks, wanting to attract the teenage and young adult market by making the parks more hip. He did this by bringing in the latest movies, signing an agreement with George Lucas that led to Indiana Jones Adventure, Captain EO, The Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter, and Star Tours. Eisner saw movies as the way to revive the company, and in many ways, it worked. Therefore, he wanted to celebrate this within the theme parks. At first, he considered building a movie pavilion at Epcot, but he eventually decided that this wouldn't be enough. Instead, he thought this concept deserved its own theme park. Around the same time Universal announced plans to build Universal Studios Florida, Eisner decided that the headlining attraction for Disney's new park should be a tram tour, taking guests through the backlots of Disney's new Hollywood East. Sound familiar? By then though, Universal had actually already decided that they didn't need to build a tram tour in Florida, as unlike over in Hollywood, this location wasn't yet an established movie studio. Instead, they would take the most popular staged parts of their Hollywood tram tour and turn these into individual attractions. From this idea, they created Jaws, Confrontation, and Earthquake the Big One. Although, once they heard Disney's plans, Universal did actually decide to add a rather shabby tram tour as a last-minute addition to their Florida park. Building a movie park was a strange choice for Disney for many reasons. At this time, Disney didn't really have much success with films, as it was before Eisner's Renaissance period had actually kicked off. Because of this, Disney teamed up with MGM, who could bring Hollywood live-action film history to the park, providing a reputable studio name and a library of classic movies to draw from. Universal may have announced their park first, but Disney was able to open theirs earlier, in 1989, thanks somewhat to the park's small size. Disney's MGM Studios opened up as a half-day park that attempted to emulate a traditional Hollywood film studio. There was an immersive Hollywood Boulevard-themed entrance, but beyond this, it was all sound stages and painted facades. What the park really offered was industrial immersion, not escapism. MGM Studios was supposed to be an idealized version of Hollywood, with a real working studio, but most filmmakers refused to shoot here, thanks to the noisy backdrop of the theme park guests. Therefore, pretty much from day one, the working studio part was never particularly true. Upon opening, the park featured only 5 attractions. The Great Movie Ride, which took guests on a journey through classic Hollywood film sets, Superstar Television, which would give guests a glimpse into a TV station's broadcast day, the Monster Sound Show, which enabled guests to add sound effects to a movie that was in production, the Magic of Disney Animation, a walkthrough attraction where guests could watch as dozens of animators worked, and, of course, the big offering, the Backstage Studio Tour. Compared to MGM Studios' opening day attractions, what Universal Studios Florida had on offer was far superior, although its opening day did not go so smoothly, as many of these rides did not wish to function. Nevertheless, once these issues were resolved, the park offered 13 attractions and was far more of a full-day park than MGM Studios. These attractions were split between those about movie making and those taking you into the movies. The latter turned out to be the most popular. In this instance, it seems Universal were far more in line with Walt Disney's way of thinking, as they opened up a park which allowed you to be immersed in fantasy experiences, while Disney opened up one where you could watch animators work on their latest sketches, exactly what Walt Disney didn't want to create when opening Disneyland. Universal had seen the success of the E.T. adventure in Hollywood, and this was what led them to go down the immersive route for many of their attractions in Florida. In addition to replicating E.T., they also built Jaws the Ride and Confrontation. These took the popular scenes on Hollywood's tram tour and expanded them into Disney-esque dark rides. The tram tour at Universal Studios Florida was very clearly a half-hearted addition, with no large-scale scenes, and it unsurprisingly closed in 1995. The MGM Studios tram tour, on the other hand, fought harder to stay. But even with its larger scale, it was also never particularly popular. Guest reports quickly told Disney that there wasn't enough to do at MGM Studios, so before the end of 1989, the Streets of New York set was removed from the studio tour and opened up to serve as a separate attraction. It also became quickly clear that even with MGM Studios and Universal Studios, Florida was not going to become the new Hollywood. Therefore, much of the filmmaking space at MGM Studios was only used for the tram tour, serving in reality as pretend sites of filmmaking. This became clear to guests who never saw anything exciting on the tour. Over the years, the tram tour was gradually scaled back, eventually only lasting 30 minutes compared to the 2 hours that it opened with, and finally it completely closed in 2014. During this period, the trend of movie studio theme parks, built far away from Hollywood and not at working studios, expanded outside of Florida. In fact, Disney themselves even repeated their own mistakes over in Paris. Even before Euro Disney opened, Disney announced their plans for a second park at this resort, set to be Disney-MGM Studios Europe. Unfortunately, Euro Disney did not have a successful start, and plans for a Disney-MGM Studios were delayed. It wasn't until the late 1990s, when the renamed Disneyland Paris's fortunes improved, that Eisner finally moved forward with the contractually promised second gate in Paris. Eisner was banking on the European cultural romanticism of Americana and hoped that the movie studio park would be a hit abroad. However, it's hard to believe that with what Disney built here, anyone could truly have ever expected success. The Walt Disney Studios Park opened to the public on the 16th of March 2002. Themed to a movie studio, this park had 3 areas: Toon Studio, Production Courtyard, and the Backlot. Toon Studio had an attraction teaching about animated filmmaking. The Backlot had stunt shows and the weirdly tied-in rock and roller coaster starring Aerosmith. Production Courtyard was all about live-action filmmaking, and was home, of course, to the studio tram tour Behind the Magic. Now, if you thought the tram tour in Florida was bad, this one really takes the cake. There was some attempt to tie in European-based movies, but the tram tour was largely Hollywood-based, and the films featured in it were far from big hits. In 2002, the Disney live-action library was pretty small, hence why 101 Dalmatians received quite a lot of this attraction's focus. It really was about the best on offer. Never home to any real filmmaking, this tram tour was the strangest and worst of them all. With such strange origins, it's no wonder that this park still finds itself struggling today. Now, just like with MGM Studios, now Hollywood Studios, many changes are coming to this park, and hopefully they will be enough to save it. It's certainly a pretty strange period in Disney history, and one which had a wider impact on the theme park industry as a whole. There were also many other movie studio theme parks born out of this boom. In trying to replicate what Universal had achieved with Universal Studios Hollywood, Disney had shown other companies that owning a theme park no longer required the detail and immersion of Magic Kingdom, therefore making it a much cheaper venture. Hollywood interest in the Australian film industry grew rapidly during the 1980s, and in 1988, Warner Brothers opened Warner Roadshow Studios in Australia. Seeing what was going on with Universal and Disney in Florida, Warner Brothers decided to bring something similar to Australia in the form of a theme park called Movie World. The park's layout was directly modelled on Universal Studios Hollywood and Disney's MGM Studios. Construction took about 16 months and the park opened in 1991. Marketed as the world's first movie-based theme park built outside the United States, opening attractions at Movie World educated guests about the processes behind filmmaking. This park also even had its own studio tour and stunt shows, but unsurprisingly, the favourite opening day attraction was the immersive Gremlins Adventure interactive dark ride, in which guests had to escape from a gremlin invasion of a studio set. Warner Brothers also operated Warner Brothers Movie World Germany, today Movie Park Germany, which opened in 1996, and Park Warner, which opened in Madrid, Spain in 2002. However, neither had a huge focus on movie making, seemingly having learned not only from Disney's mistakes, but also the success of their own Gremlins dark ride that immersive theming was the way to go. In 2021, Movie Park Germany did open a roller coaster called Movie Park Studio Tour, but don't panic, this is a far cry from any of the tram tours we've already talked about. It's much more of a thrill ride than an educational look at the world of movie making in a location where no movie making really happens. In addition to this, there were the Paramount Parks. Founded in 1993, Paramount Parks was the operator of Paramount's Kings Island, Paramount's Kings Dominion, Paramount's Great America, Paramount's Carowinds, and Paramount's Canada's Wonderland. Never particularly highly themed, these parks did lean into the movie-making idea with additions such as the backlot stunt coaster and drop zone stunt tower, although there was never too much in the way of education or theming, and these parks utilised the more traditional roller coaster-based amusement park model, with the movie-making idea as more of a sort of general theme to the park. Therefore, Cedar Fair's 2006 acquisition of the company didn't require much change to remove the Paramount movie-making associations from the parks. There was also MGM Grand Adventures, a theme park adjacent to the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino in Paradise, Nevada, which operated from 1993 to 2002. The theme park looked like a smaller version of Disney's Hollywood Studios and Universal Studios Florida, and had attractions themed to movie making, including the Backlot River Tour, a boat version of the Studio Tour attraction. But never a working movie studio, this theme park failed to attract enough guests, which ultimately led to its rather fast demise. In 2003, Movieland Park opened in Italy. Marketed as Italy's first theme park dedicated to the studios of Hollywood, this weird park is deserving of its own video. There's no licensed properties in the park, but they certainly don't shy away from obvious references. But less about the education of movie making, this park is far more a strange, romanticized version of Hollywood, full of all sorts of knockoffs which are pretty fun to look into. For a short while, it's clear to see that the theme of movie making was all the rage in the theme park industry. But unfortunately, the glitz and the glamour didn't fare well within the emerging world of digital special effects, DVD behind the scenes, and celebrity culture. By the 2000s, people were no longer as interested in the world of movie making. The glamour was gone, replaced by tabloids and the overly exposed process of movie making. In the 2000s, the art of filmmaking was demystified, and therefore became far less intriguing to the average person. DVD extras showed viewers the behind the scenes of film production, and camera equipment and editing software became more widely available, and even individuals without formal training could now make decent looking short films thanks to huge advancements in technology. All this meant that less people were excited by the concept of visiting a movie studio, especially a fake one. The inherent problem with studio-themed parks is that they don't whisk us away into the magic of great stories. Instead, they drop us into the somewhat ugly and tedious work of bringing them to the big screen. Unsurprisingly, following this realization, the 21st century has been dominated by highly themed parks, such as Universal's Islands of Adventure, Universal Studios Beijing, Disney's Animal Kingdom, and Tokyo Disney Sea. Disney and Universal seem to have both learned their lesson. Universal, the company that created the studio theme park, doesn't even build them anymore. The same can be said for both Warner Brothers and Paramount. Just take a look at the well-themed Warner Brothers Abu Dhabi and the planned Paramount Park in South Korea. In addition to this, Hollywood Studios, the Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris, Universal Studios Florida, and even Universal Studios Hollywood have all used IP to transform themselves. New additions have all been highly themed lands, which have completely shifted the focus of the parks. Just look at Super Nintendo World, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Galaxy's Edge, and Avengers Campus. Once about the process of movie making, all of these movie studios parks have now moved into the direction of immersing us in fantasy worlds. Even with all of these changes, many of the movie parks around the world still need some change before they rival the truly great theme parks across the globe. Universal Studios really doesn't hold a candle to Islands of Adventure, and in my opinion, the same can be said for Hollywood Studios in comparison to Animal Kingdom. I think it's pretty clear to see that fantasy immersion is the way to go for theme parks. It's safe to say an attraction about movie making only really works in the context of a genuine studio tour, which is why Universal Studios Hollywood still wins many points for the unique offering of the tram tour. The tram tour works here because it is a genuine look at movie history, but even this seems to like to go down the route of adding a fantasy storyline element to keep guests entertained. But let me know. How do you feel about the demise of the movie studio theme park? Are you happy to see them all go in the direction of fantasy immersion? Or do you miss this bit of theme park history? Let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out some of my other videos and the links in the description.